Today is Monday, February 15th of 2021. My name is Sarah and I'm interviewing Anna McGuire for the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. McGuire, that this recorded interview will be placed in the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at the University of Texas at Austin. So if there's anything that you don't wish to answer or talk about, I'll definitely honor your wishes. And if there's something that you do want to talk about it, please if there's something that you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. And so because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting. So I'm going to ask you a series of 5 questions and please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. So there are 2 questions that we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. So Voces wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the Benson Library at UT Austin, and will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials that you donate to Voces. So do you give Voces consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Benson Library?
Yes.
Okay.
Did I say yes, I give consent?
You can just say, yes, I agree, but
Oh, okay.
yes
Yes,
is
I
fine.
agree. I didn't want to
Okay,
say yes,
great.
I do because
Yeah, I do.
I do. Yes, I
Do you grant do you grant Voces copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Do you agree to allow us to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
All right. So we have many questions in a pre-interview form that we've already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help us in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server. Before we send it to the Benson, we'll have it stripped of any contact information for yourself or family members, so that won't be a part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
Sure.
Okay. Um, on occasion, Voces receives requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone number or your email with journalists?
Sure.
Okay, and it totally, you're welcome to also say no, but if you're okay with that, then okay, great. Okay, all right, then we can go ahead and get started with the actual interview.
Cool.
So first, maybe we can just talk about your sort of history in the performing arts. So like when and how did you become interested in performance and in performance art?
I became interested in performance from a really, really young age, just because my mom, I was around it all the time, and she sang all the time. She like danced all the time, and like I just always wanted to be like my mom. So like, and she was always in shows from when I was like, I remember watching her from the wings of shows a lot because I would always follow her around, especially before I like went to school. So I would like literally just go to rehearsals with her and that was the only time I was ever well behaved because I was really rambunctious and I was really like high energy, but whenever I was in rehearsal with her, that was the only time that I'd like actually take anything seriously. Like that was when I was like, okay, we got to reel it in. So I think that that was what I liked about theater was that it was really like intense and serious and everything else in my life felt like not very important or serious. And then when I would go with my mom to rehearsal, I was like, oh, this is important. I like being here. So yeah, I think I was exposed to it just by watching my mom and watching tapes of her in Cats and Starlight Express and like all these shows that I like heard in English but was more interested watching in Spanish because my mom was performing. So that was my first kind of like introduction to theater was listening to songs that my friends were singing, like my theater friends were singing, but like through my mom's voice in Spanish. So that's what made it exciting for me was like just watching her. And then she just knew so much about it that like if I was ever like, oh, I want to learn how to tap or oh, I want to like have voice lessons, she was so on it about like, okay, then we're going with this person, we're going with this person. Like she just like never gave me if I wanted to do something, she was super resourceful and like very on top of everything. So it was almost like very easy for me. I just had to kind of be like, oh, I'm interested in this. And she was like, okay, great. Then we're going to do it immediately. So from a really young age, she had me in ballet. She was like, we're going to voice lessons, all the things. So yeah, that's kind of how theater came about for me.
Yeah.
So it's always been kind of intense.
Yeah,
'Cause
totally.
she's
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so your like experience with that too is like so linked to her. Yeah.
For
And then I
sure.
mean obviously too like, you know, you're not just like doing it as a hobby anymore, right? Like it's something that's like what was that decision like, you know, choosing to do it something, choosing to have theater be something that's not just like a hobby but something that, you know, you're going to pursue as like a career. Did that feel like a risk for you, or like what factors did you, you know, kind of think about, or was it just sort of a natural sort of progression of things?
Honestly, I wish I had thought about it more. I literally didn't even think of other options, like fully all of middle school and high school, I already like knew, and it wasn't something that I really expressed or was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this." It was just something that in my head I was just like, "I am going to do this and nothing is going to stop me."
Right.
It wasn't something that I was like, "Should I do it? I don't know." It was like already decided, and which is
Right.
kind of scary because now I'm
Yeah.
in college and I'm like, "Oh my god, there are other options. There's other
Right.
things I could have done." But at the time, like even auditioning in the senior year, which was like so difficult. I auditioned for like 20 schools and I was like never
Yeah.
going, nothing was gonna stop me. I really, it's weird now thinking about it, but like I don't think that there was ever a moment that I didn't want to do it, which is just
Yeah.
like yeah. So that's how there's a lot of times that I like reflect on high school and middle school that I'm like, what was I thinking? And I literally don't think I even gave myself time to think of other options, which is just,
Yeah.
yeah, I honestly think I was so busy doing it that I didn't even think about like a time not doing it.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I feel like there's so many different things I like want to talk about that. But one thing that just came to mind was that, you know, most people don't actually know what it's like to like audition for, I mean, so you're studying musical theater in school right now. I mean, most people don't really know what that like audition process is like, and that it's like really, really intense. Could you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about kind of like what the steps are to actually like go to college for musical theater, and then like what some of the sort of barriers are for that? Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gotten more accessible. But it is something that once you decide, it is like a financial commitment, it's a time commitment. It's because you have to audition for all the schools individually. So you have to
Right.
apply to get into the actual school, then you need to apply to get into like to be considered for the musical theater degree, which is often a lot more difficult to get in that degree than like to get into the regular school. So once you get past the regular school, you apply to be in the musical theater school. Then you have to send in videos of you singing, acting, and dancing with their like really specific requirements. And when I was auditioning, they all had different requirements. Now there's like a common app for pre-screens,
Oh, wow.
which is great. But when I auditioned, they all had different things. So sometimes it'd be like 30-second monologue or 60-second monologue or dance number with like your full body in range or dance. So it was really specific. So we had like, I had like a bunch of spreadsheets of like, this school wants this, this, and this. So basically you have to get really specific about what each school wants. Then if you pass the pre-screen, then you have to then go on audition. Um, and there's like lots of conferences that lots of schools go to, and then you'll do like 5 auditions in a day, which was difficult because when you're auditioning for a play or a musical, you're auditioning for a character. But when you're auditioning for musical theater college, you're auditioning for like yourself. You have to be yourself at 18 and kind of give the best perception of yourself, which I think I had a really, I couldn't think about it too much because I was like just worried that I was going to come off a way that I didn't think was authentic, or which is just, it's a mind thing because you're like, I want them to like me, but I also don't want to like force it. So that's kind of why musical theater college auditioning is kind of like a, I want to be myself, but I want to be the best version of myself. But I think I found in auditioning for colleges that like just showing that you love it and showing like the material that you like to do, schools can see whether they want you or not. They've been auditioning people for decades, so like they know what kind of students they want. So I think I just didn't know that. But yeah, so the college audition experience, there's lots of different stages, but I wrote probably like 30 essays and I recorded like 10 different like songs and monologue. Like it was really intense. And then also while going to high school in your senior year, like people underestimate how that piles up. But musical theater kids are really intense. Like they want to do it. Like I think there's a part of me that was like, yes, I can't wait to do this. And also because my friends were doing it too. Like I had so many people that were doing it with me, and it almost gives you like a little bit of like a, I think we had a little bit of a superiority complex of like, well, musical theater auditioning is harder than getting into like just regular applications. And then everybody would be like, I applied to 4 schools, and we're like, we applied to 20. And it's just like, okay. It's like, and I think now I'm like, wow, I was just crazy. But at the time I was like, this is what I have to do to be successful. And the school I go to now ended up being the first school that like gave me a call back just because like a professor saw me do like a 30-second song and immediately was like, I want you to come to and have a call back. And that's how easy it can happen. Like there were some schools that I'd be in there for 20 minutes, like showing all my material, and then they'd be like, no, we don't want it. And then a school that literally saw me sing for 2 seconds in the summer before my senior year ended up being the school that was like, we immediately saw something in you. So it's just, performance is subjective and weird that way. Like you just never know your impact on people watching you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's so insane. I feel like that's something that a lot of people like I was not aware of, about auditioning for those schools and like how intense it is. And then like, I mean, I feel like now, I mean, like what has sort of COVID done to like that process? And do you think that those, I mean, obviously, I'm sure people have had to make changes for how people are auditioning for schools and also just auditioning for things in general. Like, what have those changes been like? And do you think some of those things will carry on into sort of post-pandemic life, or do you think things will sort of go back to normal in the like performance world after COVID?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually think that there is going to be almost a better chance. I think people are going to end up being in better schools for them than they would have been otherwise because of the accessibility of not having to fly to Chicago to audition and having to pay for the hotel. And like that is a huge expense that I think holds a lot of people back from auditioning from schools that could be really good for them. So I think that it's actually great that people get to audition virtually and like everything is virtual, because it, if there is a way that you can successfully audition and like get students to the right schools that way, then I think that that should always be an option. Like obviously when COVID, the pandemic gets under wraps and it's safe to audition in person, that should be an option just because it's a live performance art. But I do think the virtual thing is needs to be an option for people, because I think that it's been really positive. But I think the audition will should stay virtual or have the option to, but I think that ultimately it is a live performance art and it need like, I think that's as far as it can go. And I think that that's what's a little bit scary about this year's audition, people that are auditioning, because there is a lot you can gauge from a virtual like interaction with someone, but you just never know until you actually see them and meet them in person. And I was actually really surprised that a lot of the freshmen this year decided to come here not having visited the school at all. Because I remember visiting the school is what made my decision. So I think that there's a lot of aspects that will be missing because of the virtual experience of like auditioning, but I do think it is, for the time being, a good alternative and effective too. So
Yeah, I know. I think like this seems like one of the sort of areas that like the pandemic would have almost the biggest effect on in terms of like changing how you have to kind of like go about everything. Like, could you
yeah,
talk a little bit about like what, like what were your classes like before COVID and stuff? Like, what's sort of a normal day in like musical theater school and things like that? And then how you guys are kind of managing to do that with COVID and like what performances are like and things like that.
for sure. I mean, we were around each other all the time. I was at school from like 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. pretty much like every day for freshman and sophomore year. Like it was really intense. And we had a lounge in the musical theater building that was like where everybody interacted. It was like yeah, the lounge. It was just where everybody would go and heat up food and like be able to talk to people that aren't in your immediate classes, because there's only like 10 to 15 people in your individual classes, but we have a group of 50. So like people that you don't have class with, you're like, oh, I get to see you and talk to you. And now we don't have that. So like we rarely get to talk to people from other classes. So a normal day would be like, the classes would be a lot earlier. Now they're a lot more spaced out. I don't go to class until like 1 or 2, versus before I would go to class at like 9 and have a lot more like flexibility. And obviously, acting classes and singing classes, just closer proximity, like a lot more work with like intimacy. And like now, when we talk about intimacy and acting in that way, it's a really different conversation, because now it's about like replicating intimacy far away from someone versus like actually experiencing it together and trying to find the truth in that. Especially now we're doing a show, we're doing Spring Awakening, which is literally all about touching and intimacy, and we're like maintaining 6 feet apart. And it's been interesting, and like almost, to me, the show feels like it's really highlighting what we're all missing right now, like by emphasizing how much we like need it and then still being far away from each other. It actually, like, to me, seems more interesting. But anyway, so that would be a normal day, would be like a lot of close interaction, a lot of socializing. And so now it's really different. Like that was a part of theater I really liked, was like being able to talk to so many like outgoing and interesting people who are working on a lot of things, and like just more invested in like what we were doing with our work, versus now it's a lot about talking about how we are maybe even going to make something happen within the confinements, or like the precautions of being safe, which is like the most important thing. But it's hard because we are all like, we still want to make something happen, but then it's like, okay, but at what cost? Like that's just another factor that, like, I think filters is a filter that is added to everybody's like school work and theater work. Like it makes it a lot harder to want to have the motivation to do it, I think. And the people that are doing it, I like really like applaud them. But I had to cut back on like a lot of the things I was doing last semester, because I was just like, online improv theater, like I used to love doing improv, and now I'm like, I can't do it, and I had to like get
Yeah.
rid of it. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
stuff like that. And like I don't really talk to that many people during the day anymore. And I think that that has also influenced my time at school, because I used to like love going to school, and now it feels like I go to school and it's like we're all wearing masks and far away from each other and still doing performance things, but it's still like it just feels like
Right.
there's something missing, and it feels like we're trying to replicate like how it used to be, even though we're all fully aware it's not like that. And so it feels like a
Totally.
little bit of denial in the way of like, we're still trying to make it work, we're pushing forward, and it's like, I wish we were adjusting a little bit more, but it's also like, how do we do that? I think no one
Right.
has like a solution for it that feels like it's going to be the same as it was. And I think that's a hard thing for everybody to reconcile with.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard thing, I think, for everyone to like wrap their minds about. I do think people kind of can be in denial about what's really going on for like a long time. Yeah. Do you so are your classes mostly in person, or do you do some classes over Zoom? What is what are some of the regulations that your program is sort of put in place um
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID? And then what do you do if like someone in your, program gets COVID, or like have you had experiences like that?
Yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster with that because we left school completely, went online in at the end of 2020. So it was like from March to May of my sophomore year was completely online. But then they announced we were going to be in person. So we were all like, what is that going to look like after months of being completely online and like being quarantined and being like, what is that gonna, oh sorry, that's my email, what is that gonna look like? We like, and they really didn't give us that much information. They were saying that they were doing it in the most safe way and that all these things, but at the same time it was like, is it even what? Yeah, we had no idea. So a lot of my classes are in person, and honestly, a lot of the university wide, there are a lot of in-person classes, which I think just because of where we are, OU, a lot of like the conservative interests are leaning towards opening schools and being in person. So I think that has forced our program to also do that because we get funding from the school. So that kind of puts us in a difficult position because it's kind of forcing us to be in denial about how unsafe it actually is to be inside, even with masks, which has been effective. Like anyone who's been contracted COVID in our program it has not spread to other people.
Wow.
Yeah, which is like kind of,
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
it is impressive. And we only have like 10 people in our classes usually, and we're always distanced and we're always wearing masks. So even if somebody had COVID and I've been in rooms with people who have been positive for COVID that we found out later in the day just by an email, just being like, hey guys, just so you know, you need to get tested, you need to quarantine this person. And which is kind of annoying because you get into the semblance of life. You get into like, oh, I'm going to classes in person, I'm going to dance classes. And then at any moment, someone's like, oh, someone has COVID because it's obviously like really rampant
Right.
in Oklahoma. So it's only a matter
Totally.
of time. And you can't really control what your classmates do.
Right. So if someone does have, so like if you go to a class and then you find out later that someone does have COVID, do they tell you like who it is, or do they just say, someone in your program has it? And then if you were exposed to someone, like would they count that as an exposure? Then would you have to isolate, or what happens then?
I wish I had like it's such a case by case basis actually, and it's actually been really frustrating to not feel like we have that much guidance, but at the same time like our professors also don't have that much guidance and are literally musical theater professors. Like we're all just like, how do we deal with this? But usually they'll email us, and they used to be discreet and be like someone, and we'd all be like, who is it, and find out among each other. But now they just send the name and they're just like, this is the person, because like there's just no point. So they're like, this is the person, which I think is against something. That this is the person that is positive for COVID. So if you were in contact with this person using CDC guidelines, and then you need to get tested and quarantine. And then they'll send us a link to a screening that is done by the university, which is just it's a questionnaire that is just, it's not great. It's not great. It's very like,
Oh,
yeah, it's like asking you pretty simple questions. And then at the end is like, you're good to go or you need to quarantine.
oh, interesting. So even if you were exposed to someone, like the questionnaire would be like, "Oh, do you have a fever? Are you coughing?" And then if you say no, then they're like, "All right, you're like
Yeah.
get back in there." Wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
Because
Yeah,
when we had and I was exposed, well, our pianist got tested positive for COVID, and we had literally been like really handing him our music. So even if we were like 6 feet away from him rehearsing, we had to hand it to him, and he like touched our things. And so they sent us that he got COVID and or tested positive. He didn't. I don't think he ended up ever getting symptoms from it,
oh
uh,
wow, that's
which is
good.
interesting. So he
Yeah,
tested positive, and they emailed us, and then I filled out the screening, and it technically said that I was fine and that I could like
right,
go to class, and I didn't feel right about that, but then other people did it and then they were able to then go to class. So it's like the same thing of like, okay, if you're safe, you then are quarantining more or not going to class as much, and then you're not reaping the same benefits of going to class in person because all our classes are set up for in person. So even if you zoom into class, you're really just zooming into an in-person class, so you're not getting the same experience versus if everybody was on Zoom. So it's like
right.
it incentivizes people to not actually be safe because
Totally.
it's
Yeah,
like,
that makes sense.
yeah, because it's like if you are actually are concerned and you want to quarantine for a week, then like you just missed a week of classes, or you were on Zoom and actually not getting to be in class
Participate and
because
yeah,
our teachers are in person. When they're in person, they're obviously like teaching to the people there. And if they're older, they're definitely not cognizant of like a screen
right,
and thinking that there's someone there.
right.
So it's difficult because it really is up to our own discretion, which I don't
Yeah,
think it should ever be, because obviously there are some people that believe that it is. I mean, it should be sometimes, but there are
right.
some people that believe in it more and other people that don't. And there's
Totally.
not like a
Yeah,
standard. It's just up to everybody's own opinion about how safe something
we should
feels.
be. Yeah, right. And so there's only 10 of you guys in your class, right? Or
Yeah, like
yeah,
14, but
14.
other
Okay.
ones they have less.
Oh, the class, you have 10 people in like a class, but 14 in your program in like
Yes.
your grade. So like, is there what's, I mean, obviously you guys, probably spend a decent amount of time together. You have like all of your classes with these people and they're in person and stuff. Is there like a lot of social pressure to like follow the rules and stuff? And do you guys talk about this as a class, or is it sort of everyone's in their own pods? Like, what have those conversations been like?
I think that for my class specifically, we're already a bit split up. Like we are a class and we do get along, but we're definitely like we're not like a big friend group. Like it's definitely split up into like different friendships. So we don't really have a big problem with like pods or because my best friend in the program is my roommate. So I'm like, this is perfect. That is just my pod. But I know that it that people there weren't real conversations about it. Like if people hung out, like there was no talk of like this is my pod or whatever. Like people were really just hanging out with who they want to hang out with, and you can't really like bring it up. There have been people that have like gone to the head of our program and kind of like expressed concerns about people who have been unsafe, because if you're going to class and sitting next to someone and you know that they've been partying, like that's not safe. But for the most part, people are just hesitant to talk about anything of real substance and about how safe everyone's being. It's like kind of an unsaid thing. Now this semester, it has been better. I think people have been safer because the cases have gone up in Oklahoma. But last semester, because we were in person and because we were in an environment that was like, it's okay to be in person, I think it was easy for people to be like, okay, well, now I can just hang out with my friends, especially because there's nothing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. That makes sense. Like, do you think that if people who are like your superiors, right, say like, okay, well, we think it's fine to like have class in person, then people can kind of take that to mean like, well, then it's fine to hang out with my friends in person or things like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah,
that, and especially as it's gotten colder, it's so difficult
totally.
to continue to be outside with people. And especially because we don't,
Yeah.
we're in college housing, there's not like fireplaces or real,
Right.
like good places to be outside. I think almost it, like, as a way to preserve mental health, I think have decided to
Yeah.
risk it a little bit. And
Yeah.
luckily, no one's gotten really sick because of it. Because even if there is some intermingling of pods, ultimately it is kind of all the same 50 people. So it has worked
Right.
out in a way. At least it's not like people are hanging out with people from all different majors. Like, at least
Totally.
is the same, at least in my class, the people that do intermingle in pods, like it is really just 14 people, which,
Yeah, there's some containment.
yeah, there's some containment. It doesn't justify it or make it like
Right.
okay, especially because someone in my class recently got sick. And
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, so I mean, if we were not being safe, then it could have been really bad. But luckily,
Right.
she had been in her own, like we had all been safe about it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just a weird thing because of the school we go to just makes it feel like it's okay.
Right. Right. Like if you see people, you know, going about their lives and stuff, do you think it makes it harder to be like, does it make it harder for you to like continue to follow the rules and stuff when you see sort of people around you kind of not doing that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it bothers me, because I think that it's gotten to a point where people have rules that are in their best self-interest versus like, which obviously that's, everyone's biased about everything, obviously. Like, I'm sure that I'm not maybe always being as safe as somebody else would think I should be, but I mean, it is difficult to like go to class with someone and have them complain about how someone's not being smart about COVID, but knowing that they threw a party and like knowing that, and then them in class almost performatively being like, oh, the people that are going to bars are so like, they're so bad. Like, one of the main topics about COVID is in our class is always, oh, people are going to bars because people, they're lined down the street at OU, like going to bars. And we'll always bring that up. And there's people that are like, oh, that's so terrible, that I know have gone to parties too, and like that are putting on a show for our professors of like, oh, I'm being safe, and like have been posting on social media. In those moments, it's hard for me to feel like okay about that. And yeah, it definitely makes it frustrating when it feels like I'm home a lot of the time and like trying to be as safe as I can, and knowing that there are people that are like hanging out a lot and like, it's, and not facing any consequences for that. So often I'll be like, oh, I wish I could just do that, and like I could if I wanted to, but it doesn't feel right. And I think that knowing it doesn't feel right prevents me from doing it, because even if I put myself in those situations, I wouldn't have that much fun because I would just be like stressed about it. And I actually have no idea how people like just can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear you. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about like the beginning of COVID. So like when did you first learn about the existence of COVID-19, and then kind of what was your initial reaction to it? Like when did you realize that it was going to be, actually something that is like a big deal and life altering in the way that it has
Yeah.
been?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think I learned about COVID. I was at the duck pond here at OU, and my dad, we were gonna go, my family and I were gonna go visit family in Mexico, and we were really excited. We were going to Guadalajara, and I hadn't been there, and like I was super excited about it. And my dad called and was like, um, because I think I had, honestly, I think I had heard about it on the daily, on the podcast, The Daily. Like I'd listened, and about a virus in China, but I think like everyone here, I was like, it's not going to come here, because when we learned about Ebola and like all SARS and all the viruses and like illnesses, it always felt contained, and it always felt like
Totally.
that sucks that that's happening, but I don't think that
Yeah.
that's gonna affect me like
Yeah.
naively. I really just didn't. And then
Yeah.
when my dad canceled the trip and was like, we need to be careful, I was like, oh, because my dad usually is someone that's like, I mean, he's smart and I trust his judgment. So I was like, oh goodness, this is not good. Like, this is bad. If he's stressed about it, I was like, but I remember I came back and there were people in my program that were still like self-righteous about going on their vacations. Like I remember I came back and one of my the students in my class is like, well, I'm still going to go to New York. Like I still want to blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, alrighty. And then another girl was like, I'm going to the beach with my family. Like it was all very like, if you want to be concerned about it, you can, but it's fine. It's like, so it was up in the air. But when I really felt like it was a big deal was when I think I was over at my friend Gracie's house. I don't know if you were, I feel like you were probably there. And I think Gracie's parents were like, you guys need to go home. Like
I remember that.
yeah. And I think that I have such a vivid memory of Gracie's mom, like being stressed about it, looking at us and being like, I think you guys need
Get
to
out.
go, like
Yeah.
leave. And I think that was the last time that I would like be inside my friends' houses, like with their parents for a really long, like I've yet to
Yeah.
still, and I remember just being, that was the moment that I was like, oh my God, like we can't
Yeah.
even be around each other anymore. Um, so I think that was the big moment. And I think whenever school went completely online for the rest of the semester, I was like, we have no, when is this going to end? And it is yet to, I think only until probably May was I like, this is just life now. I think that
Right.
I was still kind of holding on to the hope of like, okay,
Maybe
maybe
next
like,
month.
maybe, and
Yeah.
actually, because I was gonna do a show over the summer, so I was like, okay, they haven't
Yeah.
canceled that yet, so we don't know. And I think when the show got canceled and it became summer, I was like, this is it. Like
Yeah.
this is life now. I can't like hold on to any semblance of the past because it's never gonna be the same.
Right. Right. So, do you know anyone? Do you know when you can expect to get vaccinated? Have there been any talk of, getting vaccines at your school?
There has been talk of it, and I think that there are resources. I'm holding back a little bit right now just because I feel like I feel like until one of my professors who's like really old gets vaccinated, I don't feel right about getting vaccinated yet. And he hasn't talked about it yet. Our professors haven't talked about if they have. So I'm kind of holding back until I but I should look into it. And someone was talking about, like, I think that there's different companies in Norman and like corporations that are vaccinating. So I think that they are distributing it through school, but you can also get it around Norman. I honestly haven't looked into it. I should, but I just haven't. Just waiting to see. Like, I'd rather other people get it before I go in there.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So like, have you been involved in any kind of social movements since COVID began? And then like, has COVID affected your perception of sort of some, as of your perception of some like social issues, especially surrounding musical theater or the
Yeah.
performing arts in general, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely have been. I really was in the dark about a lot of the theaters that were housing Broadway shows and how deeply like infiltrated into I think I just had never considered the systemic racism in that sense, just because a lot of the shows that they were housing were really diverse, inclusive, good feeling shows that I was like, oh, well, like there can't be a problem with this. And I think that as when COVID happened and more things became uncovered about where like producers were getting their funding and how a lot of them were funding the Trump campaign and that a lot of them weren't paying their BIPOC actors fairly and mistreating them, and that more stories like that were coming out, I think was when I like really got to see the underbelly of the musical theater industry as being someplace that like is a performative ally like is just kind of like a performative like to I think theater people and the theater industry just looks it's very inclusive and very liberal and all those things, but I think in having the guise of that being the like persona of theater, it actually like doesn't create accountability and doesn't actually just like allow the truth, because it's so much easier to be like, oh, well, we're on our best behavior and like we love everyone and like look, we have a Black cast member, like we love, and instead of actually creating spaces that are like that encourage different people, that it's not just white centric, that it's not just like skinny centric, that it's not just like straight centered spaces, which it always is. And like, I don't know. For me, it's like actually realizing those things and realizing that they're like not okay and that we can't continue like that, I think was something that I didn't even have time, honestly, privileged in a privileged sense. I didn't feel like I had time to even learn about or like think about. And I think a lot of people like I actually felt like a lot of people had been saying things like this for a very long time. And I think that I had always listened and like considered it and known, but I don't think that I had like, until everything was completely stopped, realized the like really detrimental impacts of that onto people until people started coming forward and speaking on it more. So I think that
Right.
I think that it has made me a lot more active in my own school about like being more vocal about it. Like now I'm at a
Yeah.
point where I don't care if I don't get cast. I don't care if I like
Yeah.
they kick me out. If I am going to raise my hand and be like, it's actually offensive when you say that, especially because a lot of our professors are really are older and they're all white except for one.
Right.
It's male dominant and it's straight dominant. So it's a lot of like people that want change, yes, but not if it's going to actually like affect their opinions and perspectives of how musical theater should be run.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it's a lot more like rocking the boat and speaking your mind, even if it upsets male egos than I think I would have done before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Could you talk about, I mean, if you're comfortable, could you talk about a time where you've like, you've been like uncomfortable with something or you've noticed something that like you don't really think is okay, and like was there, discord about it, or could you
yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
definitely. So right before the pandemic, we did a production of Into the Woods, and it was supposed to be set in like an urban setting, but there was like really a lack of consistency in trying to determine like what the actual like what the setting was, what was happening, and kind of like changing the script sometimes to make it work. Anyway, we had to put the show up really quickly, and one of the actors that played the narrator in the show is Mexican. And our director, who is a white gay male, was like having him start the show as like a Mexican street vendor and like a really like almost bordering racist accent of like, yeah, so like, and just things like that, and having him use a Mexican accent when nobody else had accents was just like really strange and didn't really like serve the story or like have anything to do with it. And I feel like there was like little to no discourse about it, and it just started happening in rehearsal one day. And the actor that it was happening to, he was not happy with it. He was uncomfortable with it, but he felt like he couldn't like say anything. And I think he had gotten to a point, he was a senior, he had gotten to a point where he was like really tired of like having to advocate for himself. And that was one of the moments that I was so like wrapped up in what I was doing in my own performance in it, that I like didn't even think about how weird that was until my mom came to see the show, and she was like, why did that happen? Because that's just so polarizing to like the only like Mexican looking person in the show is just playing a stereotype for literally no reason other than to play a stereotype. That my mom was like,
Right.
why did that happen? And I was like, I didn't even realize, like, and almost as a form of rebellion, the actor who played it like amped it up, and like made it
Yeah.
even more ridiculous than it was, as a form of like saying,
Showing.
yeah, like showing how this was someone else directing him to do it versus like him
Right.
doing it of his own accord. And there were conversations that happened afterwards, and basically our head of program was really defensive about it and was like, you should have come to me about this and blah blah blah, which of
Yeah.
course he should have come to him, whatever, it should have felt safe to do that. But at the same time, for our director to face no consequences and for it to still be on the backs of the students to advocate for each other
Yeah.
or for themselves, it just got to a point where like after that I was like, I can't let something like that happen again. And even there will be like even small things that are, we have the same director now for Spring Awakening, that he'll say
Yeah.
something like, one of my friends plays the cajon for like a number, which is just
Mhm.
like a like block of wood that you like drum on. And
Right.
she was like, it's called a cajon. And he was like, I'm just going to call it a musical beatbox thingy. And it's like, why? and
Right.
it's like, if it had been called anything else, you would have called it that. But just because it has, just small things like that, where it's like, you can't even pronounce something in Spanish the way it's supposed to be pronounced, but you're gonna like put Spanish vernacular in like a funny way in just your regular life, but you're not gonna do it when there's like
Yeah.
respect due to it. Things like that, where it's like, that was a split second thing that happened that everyone's just like, I guess because of the power dynamic, we're just gonna move on, and he's tenured and nobody can say anything, is
Yeah.
kind of the energy of musical theater college, is just like,
Yeah.
oh, they're so liberal and so open-minded, but it's like there's just no accountability. So like they are really allowed to say whatever they want, and then only after the fact, when students are like, that made us uncomfortable, they're like, we'll do better, but
Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah, that totally does put a lot of responsibility on like you guys to kind of decide when it's worth it to like stand up and say that like something makes you uncomfortable. Something has your identity kind of informed some of the thoughts that you have about that, and like how does it make how do you kind of personally like respond in situations like that? Are you able to talk about it with other students that kind of feel similarly?
Yeah, I do think that my class, the junior class at OU, is the most diverse group of students at our school, and like the most like outspoken about it. Like one of my peers, I don't like saying that word. One of my peers started a Justice League, which is like a student organization in the School of Musical Theater that is supposed to advocate for students, but at the same time, like she's a Black woman who is taking over 20 hours every semester. Like she shouldn't have to be the one to have to start it and run it. And of course she wants to do it because she's a social advocate and enjoys it, but sometimes um, it feels like the students that do care about it and do want to have discourse about it are the only ones that like are active about it and like
Right.
create all these events and videos and contents for people that people don't even make time to see or prioritize. So I think that it can be like really frustrating that although there is a community of students that's like, we do want to see change and we do want like accountability, that it still gets swept under the rug in times that it really matters. But gets used as a way to justify, oh, well, we have Justice League, so we can't really ever do anything
Right.
bad. And especially for students of color that are auditioning for OU, they use Justice League as a way to point and be like, there are good things that for our BIPOC students, like these are,
Right.
this erases everything that could possibly be racist with this organization because our students feel like they're being heard. So I don't know. Justice League has been a really positive thing and it has helped a lot of the problems, but it also has created new problems as being like
Right.
just erases like the possibility of there being anything bad. And especially because the head of our program like has a lot of say because it is connected, like almost controls Justice League in a way.
That makes sense. Do you think it makes it to where like students were almost more affected by some of the like unfair and sort of systemic issues within the program or the university or just like, you know, the world
Yeah.
or the United States, I guess, that like then they're the ones who have the responsibility to say like, okay, this isn't right, or like they it like creates more work for those people to say like these are the things that need to be changed and tell people who aren't being affected by it that these are the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
definitely I I think it's like a lot of work to put a lot of information together for people that like don't want to go look for it or aren't curious about
Right.
it on their own. So I think obviously that is just the work of social advocacy,
Yeah.
but I think it is hard
Right.
when it is so wrapped up in what your major and what you do. Because now Paris, my friend, is like she's um she's just automatically by default who you go to talk about Justice League. She's not she's incredibly talented and like
Right.
deserves to, just be a student and like just be able to go to
Right.
class and like be regarded as like a soprano who can sing and act and dance beautifully and is talented on her own and will succeed in musical theater regardless of like Justice League or whatever she's doing. That's just something she likes to do on the side, but I feel like it's so easy to just by default be like, oh, well, that's our student that is our social justice warrior, or that's our student that
Right.
like refer to her whenever you have a problem with
Right.
like social or racial injustice at her school. Don't talk to me. She's the one in charge of it. So
Right.
it like puts a lot on to the students still, even though it was meant to like advocate. And like I still think it's really impactful and good that we have it,
Yeah.
but it is also just like the power imbalance is what makes it really difficult.
Right. What do you think are some of the things that would make it better? Like if you could, you know, change things within musical theater, even just within your school or your program, like what kinds of things do you think would really make a difference in some of these issues?
Oh, have I really would love to run a musical theater program at this point. I'm like, I think I know, but I think that there needs to be a serious change in scholarship distribution, that it can't be talent based anymore. Like it's literally talent based, which is so silly because that's subjective. Obviously, like everyone is talented to have gotten into this school, and like it's ridiculous that a group of people get to decide how much money someone gets for how talented they think they are. Especially if there are people that are very capable of paying for college without any financial aid, to actually look at the numbers and be like, which ones of our students are struggling to come back every semester? How do we get the most money to those students? And I don't feel like there's an emphasis on that, especially like a lot of the Black women in my program have trouble paying for school, and it doesn't feel like they get as much support, especially um, for how much they bring to the program, because a lot of the time they are, especially one of my best friends, she is the poster child of OU musical theater, and lots of BIPOC women come to the school and she is the person that she performs for them and talks to them and like is a big reason why people are compelled to come to this school. And she doesn't get nearly as much scholarship money as she should. And she like works overtime to make it happen for the school. And I don't feel like, so I think that the imbalance financially needs to be fixed. Like, I think she needs to get a lot more. All of the students that are struggling to pay for school I think that that's almost like a form of reparation that the school could like provide in a really like honestly easy way for them. They know how to get money, they know how, and it's just like I feel like they're distributing it in a way that's like everybody gets the same opportunities, but obviously everybody came from different financial, socioeconomic standpoints in our country. So like that just doesn't make sense. So I think that, and then also I think just replacing some professors with diverse people, different people. I'm not even just talking about racially diverse. It's just a lot of our professors are from Oklahoma and white, and that's okay. Like obviously I just think that when the time comes for them to retire or for them to move on, really emphasizing different kind of faculty, because there are so many BIPOC like artists and teachers that would be great for our school and that would bring a lot to the school. So I think that like diversifying our faculty so that students actually feel like they're represented like in the classroom to see that, I think would be really good. So I think those are the main two things that I'm like, I think that would help a lot, because then those different voices would be in the faculty meetings, because we can come in and talk at the faculty all day, but at the end of the day, they have their separate meetings where they decide the things that they decide. And if they have all white voices deciding those things all the time, it's definitely not always going to be at the benefit of students that aren't white and students that aren't men, because there are only like 2-3 women faculty out of like 8, or like where it's a minority. It's like, so I don't know. I would just, those would be my 2 ideas.
Yeah, totally. I think that sounds really important. Yeah, I would think that would make like a huge difference, you know? Yeah. I know you said earlier too, when you were talking about that experience with Into the Woods, and you mentioned that your mom was the one who sort of initially brought it up and was like, why is that, you know, something that's happening? Does she kind of inform some of your thinking about these things?
I definitely think she does. I think that hearing the musical theater and acting perspective she has in Mexico City and how her career happened there and like all of her experiences there versus how she's treated in the United States and how the industry regards her talent and how she looks here, it's substantially different.
Yeah. Wait, could you talk a little bit about, just for people listening, like what she did in Mexico City and like what she was involved with, and then like what she's been involved with here, and like say more about all of that? I think that's really interesting.
It is. Yeah. She did a lot of professional theater in Mexico. A lot of the creative teams from Broadway would then go to Mexico City and translate the musicals, and then with the same creative team put up the show in Mexico. So she originated roles in Cats. She was the original Rumpelteazer. She was the original, I forgot the character's name, in Starlight Express. She had to like train for that for 2 years to roller skate and sing, and
it's amazing.
It's awesome. And same with Cats. They had to train for like 6 months because it's such a demanding show. So basically she was in the group of performers that would be contracted to be in these big shows for Mexico. And what other shows she was in? She was in Hello Dolly. Like she did a lot of shows. And then my dad and my mom met, and he wanted to come back to Austin to go to graduate school. And so that felt weird to say the full grad school. And they actually held off on going because my mom was still doing Starlight Express, and then they eventually came to Austin. And she's always been really involved in voiceovers, so that's a lot of what she does in Austin has been voiceovers, and she's always had a side job of translating and interpreting in medically and with therapy and also just conferences in general. So she's always kept that up as well. And yeah, so she's been doing that, and she did voiceovers. She does like a billion things. But she did
Wait, what are voiceovers? Like
voiceovers for like television or radio
Oh,
or
got
like,
it.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
cool. I
yeah.
didn't know that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so she does a lot of them in Spanish. So like,
Right.
it can be like video games. She also did like a whole animated series on, I think it was like a bunch of, yeah, she had like a character on some like this like TV series that was all about like teaching kids about difficult subjects, and we had like all the DVD for it, and there was like one
Oh,
on
wow.
and yeah, so she's done like a lot of different projects. She's
Yeah.
always been kept busy and always had people like asking her to do things, which is like a really cool thing. But when she came to Austin, she had a really hard time uh like getting involved in the theater scene. But obviously she eventually did, and I think people started to realize that she was like legitimate and like a really seasoned artist and very like knew what she was talking about. But it took her a while just to get in the door because of stereotypes and assumptions about her intelligence and talent, because English is clearly not her first language. And I think only after like persevering and like continuing to audition was she able to prove herself. And then after a certain amount of time, then people started calling her, because now she basically gets like by just people asking her to be like, can you please audition for this thing, like can you please just come in to, and she's like, I guess. Versus before, obviously when you're younger you're like busting your butt into auditions and stuff, but I think now she's at a point where she feels content like doing her own projects. She is part of I'm trying to think of what it's called, a theater company called Central, which is like a full virtual theater company where they like, and I took a clowning class through it with a woman in Argentina, yeah. And it was everything. Like, so she has like a lot of friends in all different places that are theater artists that she works with now, and they do like readings of shows, and so that fulfills her, I think.
Yeah.
And then, because of connections like that, there's people that she just did a show that was in Boston called Sonia Se Fue because a director in Central referred her to a friend there. So like the theater scene's really small, and now because a lot of things are virtual, she can actually do like a lot more and has met a lot more people than like she would have just in the Austin community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so she's doing it, and so like all of the shows that she's doing right now are just virtual, like through Zoom.
Yes,
Okay.
I've seen her in like 3 Zoom productions.
Wow.
In the last year. And I think she thinks they're a lot more challenging, but I think that she has enjoyed doing them.
Yeah.
And I think it probably feels nicer to be safe about it. Because right now I'm in a show where we're wearing masks during the show, and even that feels a little bit like, ah.
Oh, wow. Oh, so do you sing with the mask on?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you do that? How is that?
Yeah, we have like special masks that we use for the show.
Okay.
But they really are just like medical, like we're fully singing in them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's actually not as bad as you would think. It's not.
Yeah.
It's just different. It's more, for me, it's more annoying because of how it moves versus like breath or like anything.
Got it.
And it's also muffled, so you have to just enunciate more.
Right. But, and then how is acting in them?
A lot of eyes. A lot of eyes. I mean, it's actually not as bad as you would think. And I've actually
Okay, yeah.
been really impressed with how people have been acting in it.
Wow.
Because I think when we first came back in person with masks, I was like, how's this gonna work? Like,
Yeah.
and I've just been like blown away by some performances in masks
Yeah.
with my classmates where I'm just like, I don't even, you almost forget for a second, but it is a lot of eyes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like movement. It's a lot
Totally.
more like expressive than like maybe we would have been before. But
Yeah.
it works.
I know there are like two more things I kind of want to talk about. Like, I know that this has sort of been a conversation in theater pre-pandemic, like the thing, like how Hamilton was recorded, right? And then it's able to be like distributed to the masses, because obviously like going to a Broadway show is very expensive, or even going to,
Right.
you know, an off-Broadway show is pretty expensive. Do you think that the
Right.
pandemic will sort of change norms around like recording live performance? Or do you think, or like, also, do you think that, you know, these like Zoom performances will be something that continues after COVID ends, hopefully ends?
Yeah, hopefully ends.
Yeah.
I love like a recording of a live performance. I think that if there is an audience, then and I think that there's a lot of value in them. I love them, and I think that they're
Yeah. It's a
great.
little bit of a controversial thing, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that like very like conservative, like purists about theater are like, it's
Right.
meant to be a sacred watching
Right.
experience, which like I understand that as well. I think that there are some forms of theater that it does not leave the
It doesn't translate to,
yeah, it doesn't
yeah.
translate, and it just shouldn't leave the space that it should feel like really intimate, and there shouldn't be cameras because then the audience feels like they're kind of being recorded too. So I think that there's some things that it doesn't solicit that, but I think that there are some things that like that it should reach more people, and that they're super capable and have the money to do it. So why not do it? And I think they're great. I think that it doesn't hurt anyone to do it. I think it helps more people than it like bothers other people. So
Right.
I definitely have seen so much more theater this past year that I wouldn't have seen. And obviously I
Right.
missed like being able to just like go into my community and see like the shows at my
Yeah.
school or see shows in Austin. Like obviously I really missed that, but I've also gotten to see like shows like the New York City Ballet put all their shows like on YouTube, or like
Wow.
the like I've watched Broadway shows on YouTube that wouldn't have been there otherwise, or like other theater companies that it's like they're just putting it out there because they're like, and
Yeah.
I really like it. I think it's
Yeah.
cool, especially since there's nothing else to do, like you might as well.
Totally.
Um but I think there was a second part of that question you asked me.
Oh, what was that?
Virtual
Oh,
theater.
do you think
Oh,
live? Yeah, yeah.
something about Zoom theater.
Like, do you think that will continue?
I low-key hope not.
Oh, you were gonna say that.
Yeah, I don't like Zoom productions. Like if
Yeah.
we have to do them,
Right.
that's fine,
Right.
but I don't like them. And
Yeah.
if I
What's hard about it?
it's just hard to, for me at least, con- to like retain my attention on a
Totally.
computer. Like I just associate watching something on my computer like I can do something else while I'm doing it. I can like fold
Yeah.
my laundry while I watch it. And I
Yeah.
just miss the part of theater that's like everything else is, you have to turn everything else off. Like
Yeah.
you are in a completely different environment where you are now like fully immersed into something else.
Right.
I really miss that. And I think that it's really hard, at least for me, to like feel that way if I'm in my room watching something.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just get to that point versus like all the almost ritualistic parts of theater of like getting your ticket and sitting down and everyone has to be quiet. You cannot look at your phone.
Right.
Versus now it's like if your phone's right there and you're watching something and someone texts you, you're going to look at it.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
that's why I
Yeah, that
don't,
makes sense.
it's not because people aren't giving me life on Zoom, because
Yeah, yeah,
I've seen some really incredible performances
yeah,
on Zoom that it's almost like double impressive, because it's like,
totally.
I don't know how you're doing this and doing so well in such a difficult situation, but even so, I can't fully be immersed in the world. I think
Totally.
it's really difficult. So
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
Zoom doesn't continue, but I do think that live recordings of things should continue, or like
right.
just like more people should see it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And so then I know too, like when you graduate, right? Like the norm is for you guys to kind of just go to New York, right? And then just kind of try to
Make it
make
happen.
it.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, how's that? How have I mean, I guess you sort of missed the like worst part of it, I guess, by hopefully by the time you graduate, maybe that could be an option again. But do you know people that have tried to do that in during COVID, or has it changed the way you've thought about that sort of like norm?
Yeah, it is such it is like, especially in my program, like the only option ever seemed for people to move to a big city and like try to work as an actor. And people had been really successful at it, you know. And then whenever the pandemic hit, people definitely didn't move um, during the summer of 2020, or but then people started moving in the fall of 2020, and like people have, like I know people that are in my program that are planning on it regardless of how things turn out. I think a lot of people are so determined and really like so have their sights set on moving to New York, whether or not they're going to be working this, and they're not going to let anything deter them from doing that, which I think comes with a
Right.
lot of like, you have to be in a financially secure place to do that.
Totally. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
So I think it just depends on the situation. I think that people that are able to do it and really, really want to are doing it, and they're not holding back. And
Yeah.
I personally can't relate to that.
Yeah.
I don't, I need some water. One sec.
Yeah, don't worry.
Sorry. What was I saying? Yeah, I think that there are people that are making it work, and have gotten some work there in New York. And
Wow.
people, yeah, which is like good for you. And I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, I think that if it works out for people to like be in a living situation that they're like, okay, I'm going to be set up for when everything restarts,
Right.
and you feel capable of doing that, then
Then you can do
I
it.
don't see anything wrong with that if that's what makes people, you know, feel fulfilled and happy in that way.
Yeah.
But I do know a lot of people have kind of changed their course of action and changed what they want to do. And I think a lot of people are coming to terms more with, oh, well, what are other things I could do in this time before things start up again, or finding other interests, or
Yeah. Have you
planning.
felt that way? Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely, I mean, I never had like a definite plan of moving to New York. I think that at some point I do want to live there, maybe not even because I want to be a working actor, mostly just because I want to live there. Um, so I think that I definitely haven't ever had a timeline of when I wanted to go there. So I think it just, for me, clarified that I don't need to go there anytime soon, which honestly was kind of a relief. I think that I felt a lot of pressure to like work every summer and then move to New York and then audition, and like make it happen. And I think now I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't even know if I actually wanted to do that before. And now that this has happened, I think that it has given me the like relinquishment of that expectation of like having to do that, especially with this major. It feels like that's the only thing you should do. But I think it's like opened my eyes to so many different things I can do. And it actually has like made me more excited to graduate, because it makes me be like, okay, now I don't have to move to New York, or I don't, which I never had to. But when you're around this environment, every
Totally.
every class is like, well, when you moved to New York, well, when you moved to New York. And
Yeah.
even now they're still doing that. And I'm like,
Mm.
nothing exists there. I mean,
Right.
as much theater exists there as it exists here. So it's like,
Yeah.
why not be here?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
spend a ton of money to like get an apartment, you know? So
Yeah.
it just feels like everyone's stagnant right now. So I might as well be not stagnant in theater. Like I might as well be home and like work on my own projects or things that I'm excited about that aren't dependent on a geographical location or like
Totally.
something that I can always be like, well, I have this, you know, if
Yeah.
all fails, I don't need an external thing to like justify if I'm doing art the way I want to do it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, this is totally, I could totally see this being an opportunity to like give you the space to even consider other options where like maybe before it would just seem like you just get swept up in everyone else is doing this and this is just the expectation. So then that's just what you do without maybe giving it the thought that
It deserves.
you otherwise would. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think that I would just go into it quickly. And I think that
Yeah.
that's how I went into this major and how I kind of
Yeah.
just ended up. My life has snowballed into like, it was super, I was always super sure of where I was going and always like
Yeah.
barreling forward that I never even thought, oh, do I actually want this? Versus like,
Right.
oh, I need to do this to get further in this way. Now I'm like, I feel a lot more introspective than I think a lot of people do
Yeah.
after pandemic when you just have to sit with yourself and be like, well, what do you actually want to do? Like, do you
Right.
actually want to submit a bunch of auditions for all these theater companies that you like don't really want to play like fish number two in Little Mermaid in some company in Kentucky? Or do you
Yeah.
like want to write a play? Or like do you want to like, I don't know, like create something on your own? Versus before I would have been like, I'm sending in the audition tape. Like I have to do it. It's really important because I need to get equity points to then be on Broadway. And now I'm like, well, I mean, who knows when Miss Broadway will be back? And I gotta like I feel like I need to be artistically fulfilled on my own without that right now for a while. So
Yeah.
kind of having to figure it out. And I think that the artists that are like feeling inspired again and feeling fulfilled again are the people that are like figuring out how to adjust to it or change what they were doing versus people that are still really dependent on or still really externally focused on like, okay, when things open up, that's when things will be okay. And that's when I can be an
Right.
artist again versus like adjusting to it and being like, well, what's the best I can do right now?
Yeah.
Um, kind of I think I had to put my ego aside of what I thought my life was going to be. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's like, I think what we've all had to do to
Yep.
adjust to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, yeah, I feel like that's true in a lot of people's cases, but I mean, especially true for y'all, where it's like the main thing that you're doing is like completely dependent on people gathering in huge
Yeah.
groups. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. That's such a crazy thing to have like happen in your field. Yeah. Yeah.
It definitely, I think it was really, really difficult for a while because I like have always been someone who like, yeah, that was rehearsing all the time, auditioning all the time, doing shows, seeing shows, very socially based theater community type person. Like that was where I got a lot of my just everything, like my
Yeah.
joy and like how that was like my place in the world. So when it was all taken away, I was like, who am I? And I think that it's just going to make me so much more appreciative of it when it comes back because I don't think I like realized how much I needed it. But I definitely feel like I think that the past year was really important, like in terms of a lot of theater people to be like, we need to like reevaluate. I don't know, like think about it more and come back more intentionally because it can be taken away. And I don't think
Yeah.
anyone, I would have never thought I took it so for granted.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that's like, I mean, I think that was like described so well. That's honestly like a really kind of nice and like beautiful way of sort of describing what I think like a lot of people have really gone through, but especially like you guys. I mean, I think like this could be a good stopping point, but also if there's anything else that you think is like missing, or if there's anything you want to add about sort of your experiences or COVID or your own like personal identities, you know, I would totally want to listen to that too. So
Oh.
yeah.
No, I think that that's a good ending point.
Okay. Okay. Well then, yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.
Okay.
Where's the, oh, there we go.